The turning point is here. A trade agreement between China and the USA is now imminent. As if I hadn't told you so. This is probably the most important thing the market needs right now. It says here that U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent says China is ready to conclude a trade agreement with the USA after 2 days of negotiations. Bessent says that with the agreement, President Trump's 100% tariff, which is set to take effect on November 1st, will be lifted. November is supposed to go into effect. A lot of capital is currently being held back here, which can now slowly start flowing back into Bitcoin. You can also see that the Bitcoin price has reacted very, very positively here at first. It has almost climbed up to 114,000 US dollars here, which makes sense because now the risk capital is coming back into the market. We're switching to risk on mode. Phase 10 is now being initiated. Just like I've told you many times before, you can go back 1 or 2 videos. Back then, I said the trading style would have to come soon. We're just about to enter phase 10. First, create uncertainty in the market, crash the markets, then downplay everything, and do the same old routine again. So Trump always chickens out, Trump always backs down. And in the end, act like everything's cool, easy peasy, now we've got the trade deal. And after the trade deal, what happens after the trade deal? Every time, just like last time, we shoot up to new all-time highs. And that's what's coming up now. Of course, if there's a natural disaster, whatever, a stock market crash, aliens attack, then this plan can be ruined. But the base case now is that next, we're going to rise to new all-time highs. Of course, this is not financial advice. And as always, it's all about probabilities. But before we dive into that, there are also new purchases from Michael Saylor and others. A lot of new developments. Before we get into it, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a second and hit the like button for new Bitcoin highs, for new all-time highs. And as a little thank you, I'll show you this clothespin. Look, if you zoom in here, really cool clothespin. It brings good luck. It brings all of you a lot of luck. We can see it here now as well. Investors are being confronted with some important news from China. The trade agreement is on the horizon. China's Deputy Minister of Commerce just announced that the US and China have reached a consensus on key trade issues. This includes export controls, tariff suspensions, measures related to fentanyl, cooperation in the fight against drugs, trade expansion, and fees. According to Section 301 of the US, that's a far-reaching deal. Furthermore, US Treasury Secretary Bessent stated that China, right, as we already mentioned, a trade agreement is imminent. Bessent added that China intends to make significant soybean purchases in the US. And all this while President Trump declares that he hopes for a complete agreement with China this week. As we said on the 10th, the 100% tariffs by President Trump on China will most likely not take effect. The KBC letter also assumes that a trade agreement is imminent here, which just fits perfectly into the current timeline. And then all the bears would once again be caught off guard. And maybe, after all, the fourth quarter Bitcoin rally will happen. At the same time, we can see it very clearly here. The number of global interest rate cuts in the last 24 months is already higher than after COVID. But the bears still believe that Bitcoin has already reached its peak. And we can see that here as well. Back then, during the great financial crisis here, 2009, 2011, 2010, after that we had 313 cuts. During the Corona period, we had 255 cuts. And now we're at 312 cuts. Of course, the most important central bank is still lagging behind, still crawling after the others. The US central bank still apparently hasn't understood the whole situation. Or rather, it's less about understanding and more about political issues, in my opinion. But they will also cut rates now. The likelihood that there will be more rate cuts this year is very, very high. At the same time, we see the fiat system still in a state of high turmoil. We see here, Iran's government announces, one of the largest banks is bankrupt, assets have been seized by the state, 42 million customers, 5 billion tomen affected, so apparently that's the currency, tomen. I didn't even know that. Lines are forming because people can't withdraw their money. Bitcoin in self-custody solves this problem. Wake up. That's why you should get hardware wallets. Get yourself a hardware wallet. You'll be very, very safe that way, even when you're on the go. It's important to always use an open-source hardware wallet that also has a display. Ideally, it should also have a secure element. That's why I recommend the TREZOR hardware wallet. It's even quantum ready. I'll put a link to TREZOR down below for you. With the code BitcoinHotel, you even get 10% off a TREZOR hardware wallet. That's also the brand new one. Oh, I'm bleeding here. I just scratched myself. The brand new TREZOR 7 hardware wallet has also just been released. Feel free to check it out. We'll get to that in a moment too. Michael Saylor and the new purchases. But first, we have a very, very exciting outlook on Bitcoin's price development until the end of the year. Here from Christian Klager together with Christian from Sitter.
No, so we definitely need something besides Bitcoin here. Bitcoin to the moon. I'd like your take on that again. A lot of people are more cautious and see 150,000 because that's roughly the global money supply as well. Others have completely crazy predictions for the end of the year. What are your thoughts on that?
One prediction I always make is, it will inevitably go up. The question you have to ask yourself is, how many pieces of meat can I buy with it? Because, at the same time, the value of fiat money will also decrease. That means, nominally, It will definitely rise. Where to? I don't know. All I know is, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, provided it's in your hardware wallet and not just some derivative in your stock portfolio. So my price prediction, one Bitcoin will be exactly 100 million Satoshis.
Well, you managed to dodge the whole thing very elegantly just now. I actually have to disagree with you a bit here, or at least I have a different perspective, because you hear that quite often. And I believed it myself for a long time too. If Bitcoin suddenly shoots up to 1 million, then our global economy, and this, and the other, would be in trouble. And then what would a donor or a pretzel cost? But then I understood. Now we're back to charts. And there are people like Michael Saylor and others who are famous for those block diagrams showing the 900 trillion in assets out there. If you look at the 2 trillion of Bitcoin, you realize just how unbelievably much that is. People like Leon Wankham and others also talk about those 900 trillion. I think Jack Mallers also recently said that 450 trillion out of those 900 trillion is definitely something the Bitcoin market is going after. And if I do the math, 2 out of 450, then we still have a ton of upside ahead of us. And because there's so much capital out there, I'm pretty sure, yeah, the price of donor and pretzels, I'm with you on that, will go up. But Bitcoin will be the ultimate, disproportionately strong outperformer. And as you actually said at the beginning, if you look at the charts denominated in Bitcoin, then purchasing power goes down. So, number go up, are you in?
Number go up.
1 Bitcoin stays 1 Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And yes, I also agree with Leon Wankham. A lot of money from these traditional safe haven assets will simply flow into Bitcoin because it's just so much easier. Honestly, all the people who always think Bitcoin is so complicated, the financial system is way more complicated, owning real estate is way more complicated, and taking care of it is much more involved. Just go ahead and do your 50 or 100 hours of Bitcoin research, study Bitcoin, and then you'll get those 100 hours back right away because you won't have to worry about all that other stuff anymore.
I'm 100% with you on that.
So, you heard it here first. Bitcoin is going to outperform donor. And even bratwurst, if that's not bullish, I don't know what is. And now let's take a look here. Here we can see the capital pools that were just being talked about. We see Bitcoin here at 2.5 trillion. This is a bit outdated. Here it's still at 2 trillion. Here we see real estate at 370 trillion, bonds at 320 trillion, stocks here at 135 trillion, money market funds, cash equivalents, and so on, here at 130 trillion. And here, gold at. I think it's already around 35 trillion or so. And what's going to happen now is that because Bitcoin has superior store value properties, so Bitcoin is better at storing value than real estate because it's more flexible, because it's more portable, because it's easier to verify how much Bitcoin I have out of the total supply compared to how much real estate I have relative to the total stock, and because it's scarcer, rarer. And the same, of course, also applies here to bonds. Bonds are a very, very old school instrument, sometimes offering such poor interest rates that you can't even beat inflation. So naturally, Bitcoin is much more interesting here. Much more interesting here. Stocks always carry third-party risks, like CEO risk, standard risk, regulatory risk. The same also applies here to cash reserves, that is, cash equivalents. And of course, also here to gold. There we have certain properties that are also very, very good as a store of value. But what's missing is portability. Scarcity is missing too, and all of that. Bitcoin has an absolute limit, gold only a relative one. And that's why money will flow from this pot here, money will flow in here, money will flow in there, money will flow from this pot over here, and from this pot over there. And even from the art market, money will flow into Bitcoin. The flows are always one-way streets. It's always from the larger capital pools into Bitcoin. The more humanity wakes up, the more Bitcoin can absorb this capital. And whether that's 300, 400, or 500 trillion in the end, that's a philosophical question. Everyone can reflect on that for themselves. But that's what's going to happen here. Of course, always under the basic assumption that Bitcoin remains secure and decentralized. But I'm just going to assume that for now. Then we have Michael Saylor here, who has also realized this, and now he's posting, it's orange.day. So there are going to be even more red dots now. And with that, he's announcing new purchases. We're very curious to see what happens. In recent weeks, he's mainly bought Bitcoin through the preferred shares here, I think that's going to be the case again this week because the MNAV compression is still kicking in here. Still a very, very low MNAV, which is being used to dilute the common stock. That's why I think he'll go for the preferred shares again. That's actually pretty brilliant. Saylor is now so well positioned that even if the premium on strategy isn't that high, meaning the stock isn't valued much higher compared to the underlying Bitcoin, Saylor can still raise money, even though there's no premium. Normally, it's really, really easy for him when the premium is very high, because then he can just issue new shares to buy Bitcoin with the proceeds. That will come back again. These are just certain cycles. We also see that treasury companies experience even greater volatility. That's the cyclicality. The bull and bear market phases are much more pronounced. In a normal Bitcoin bull and bear market, we see that treasury companies sometimes go through 2 or even 3 cycles within a single bull bear market, where even the small corrections can feel almost like a major bear market for Bitcoin. What I forgot to mention earlier is that money market funds might also soon be about to flow back into the capital market. These are basically like parking lots. You can imagine people just park their money there when they don't know what else to do with it. And as soon as the risk-on scenario kicks in again, capital from this pot will also flow into Bitcoin. The money will come from many different sources, but of course, we still need the final confirmation. Right now, we have the preliminary confirmation. The final confirmation is still missing, and then the price should make another jump upwards. Guys, bullish. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below for you. 21 Bitcoin. Code Bitcoin Hotel. You can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin if you use this. And with that, I'm signing off here from Paradise Blue Sky, and now I'm heading to the Bitcoin farmers market. Peace out.